All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Distance Learning with Common Sense. My name is Barbara Huth and I am the Regional Education Program Manager in the DC metro area. Just as a reminder, this conversation will be posted on our Common Sense Ed YouTube channel with all the links and all the resources that are shared today. We're going to share a lot today, so if you don't get to all of them, don't worry, they'll be posted later and you can share with your colleagues. I'm extremely excited to have this conversation with two former colleagues where I used to work and teach at Mooresville Graded School District. So let's learn a little bit more about our guests, Lindsay and Jill. Jill, will you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit more about Mooresville and your role?
Absolutely. My name is Jill Zsupann. I've been teaching 21 years in a variety of settings in New York and in New Jersey and down in Charlotte and then up in Mooresville, North Carolina. So I've kind of taught the spectrum of elementary school. So I've taught first, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and eighth over the course of my career. I spent the last 4 years teaching third grade, and as of last Thursday found out I was going to be teaching first grade on a permanent online academy for the year. So it's very exciting. But yes, that is the transition that I'm going through. I am teetering between two school teams and online teams, and good times.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people in the chat can relate, just like, things are changing and we're all being flexible as those are changing. But we're so excited to have you here today. I'm really excited to share some of the resources that you shared with me earlier. Lindsay, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role in Mooresville?
Hello, I'm Lindsay Smith, and I'm a science teacher at Mooresville High School. I teach AP Environmental Science, Environmental Earth Science, and Marine Science. So I teach predominantly ninth graders, and I love them. And so we at Mooresville High School, we're getting really geared up because we're going to be virtual for at least the first 9 weeks. So lots of fun, exciting things happening right now. One of the good things is that I started to get to know my kids already this week. So we've been going through a bunch of different freshman orientation. So it really, I hadn't talked to kids since like beginning of May. So it's been really like awesome to finally get to talk to kids again, which I love.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. And, even though we're starting virtual, right? You're both starting virtual this year. We know that it's so important that our students have active or hands-on activities, especially, when we're looking at science activities and, things like that. So can you share some examples of how you incorporated some hands-on learning activities in distance learning, maybe in the springtime, and maybe thinking about like what you're excited about for this coming school year?
So when we transitioned, especially at the elementary level, it was more Google Meets and the social emotional piece. But it, went on week after week and trying to build that connection and that content. But also this year we've transitioned into, we're going to have an hour and a half of synchronous learning every day. Of content, so reading and math. Last year, all of their content was on slides that they were supposed to do independently. So kind of thinking about the Google Meets, but also adding content to it. And it was the spring, so kind of in a realm where plants and looking at the parts of a plant and fruits and vegetables, and so a couple of things in the link that I shared, but using stuff around their house. So we did a lesson about the difference between fruits and vegetables, and they brought those, so they knew ahead of time, they brought those to the meet. Then we had a conversation about differentiating between the two, sorting. We incorporated Padlet so they could take pictures of themselves on their laptops and then add those to a Padlet based on the categorization that we'd come up with. So that was just one idea that we tried.
I think that was so much fun. Can you tell a little bit about like the parts of the plant activity that you did and just like
So
how
I
you laid
think
it out?
something that I've learned is finding those things that seem to work and then using them for different content bases. So Padlet, my kids were already kind of familiar with, and Flipgrid, they were already kind of familiar with. And so using those two in a lot of different ways. So with the parts of the plant, similar to the fruits and vegetables lab, we talked kind of briefly about the parts of the plant that spiraled into, I think, every year from kindergarten on. But then they were supposed to go outside into their yard, into the community. We kind of set some parameters. Don't pick your mom's most beautiful flowers. But kind of set that up to see if they could come up with an example of a root, of a stem, of a leaf, of a flower, and then talking about those different parts. So then we met, they shared, they took pictures, and then they sorted them on the Padlet. So some different examples of roots, some different examples of stems based on the plants that they came up with. So kind of what was around them, what similarities they found, what differences they found. It was something they all had access to.
Great. And with oh no, your light went out.
My light went off.
That's all right. Lindsay, will you share a little bit about some of the things that you did in the spring to kind of get them outside and, you know, moving and interacting with things that they might already have at home?
Yeah, definitely. So one of my big things as a science teacher, and I stress in my classroom all the time, is that science is a verb, that we are doing science. We are not just learning about science. And so being virtual, I didn't want that to change. And so I wanted my kids to still be doing the scientific method and being involved in science. So in the spring, one of the things that I came up with was the home lab design. And so I let my kids come up with whatever they wanted. And I gave them an outline. And so they had to complete that ahead of time. And I reviewed it. And that was all done through Google Docs so that I can check that, you know, this is really a testable hypothesis and that sort of thing. And then they went and tested it for 2 to 3 weeks as we were in the virtual setting. And then they wrote a formal lab report. And I got some really crazy stuff. Some things that were done with just really simple things that they had in their house, like testing if random things in their kitchens killed weeds better than weed killer. I had one girl that her family raises goats. And so she tested different types of feed and grass seed to see which one her goats like the best. To tell her if that tells her something about like the native biome of her types of goats, which that was so cool. And so we did things like that. As I think about what I want to do this fall in the first 9 weeks, and I mean, honestly, at this point, it probably will extend past the first 9 weeks, is really involving citizen science. So there's so many things that you can do with kids that require very, very little supplies, if any. Just really their sense of observation, and they can be involved in scientific projects where that data actually means something. And so when the data means something, kids get really excited and they want to make sure they do it well. So we do the GLOBE program at our school, but another awesome way to find resources for doing citizen science is SciStarter. It's just like this big mass where you can search really anything, and one of the search things that you can do is no supplies. So it's really easy to be able to do those science, and especially get kids outside, get them away from those computer screens, because that's one of the things I worry about, is that they're going to be in front of their screen time is just going to be so much. And so that's one of the things I'm looking forward to, is more of that.
Awesome. Yes. And there's so many great citizen science projects out there that, as Lindsay said, require nothing. One of my favorites was so simple, like Project Squirrel, observing squirrels in their natural habitat. And you can, differentiate it, whether you're doing that with, elementary kids all the way up through high school. So some really fun ideas with citizen science. And so just thinking about, like, in the springtime, we had to transition so fast, right? And so we didn't have necessarily a lot of time. But also we already had these established relationships. And so that is going to change for the fall as we're starting off new. So can both of you kind of just talk a little bit about some of the things you're thinking about, like how this back to school year is going to be a little different, and then maybe just some of the benefits of the new year, and then maybe some things that you are anticipating might be a challenge. And Lindsay, if you want to start, and then Jill.
Sure. So I mean, I think it's going to be really, really challenging, especially with high school students, where relationships mean so much, to be able to do that virtually. Just this week, as I was doing orientation with some of my kids, that I was already trying to get to know them. We did just a really simple thing of find an object, where I said, find an object in your home that's special to me and tell me about it, or special to you and tell me about it. Go and find your pet and tell me about your pet. Go and find a picture of a family member or someone that's special to you and tell me about that. So just, just trying to be as interactive as possible. Another big thing that I am looking forward to, but also apprehensive about, is, just being able to make sure that I have all the supplies necessary for my kids in order to do all these things. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is just very basic labs that have only household materials that they can just grab and use very easily. Another one that I'm probably going to do as well is what I call the home ecosystem project, where kids are going to go out and basically do a scavenger hunt in their yard and take pictures of their abiotic and biotic factors and a predator-prey relationship. So they're getting outside, they're telling me about their ecosystem, so I'm learning about their home life a little bit as well. And so it's science, and they're showing me that they know the topic, but I'm also getting to know them.
Those are such great ideas. Sorry, Jill.
No.
Those are such great ideas. So Jill, what are some ideas that you're thinking about for the fall?
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is critical, especially now transitioning to first grade. Now, I think that by nature, I think elementary school teachers do a lot of this. But how this looks in that comfort level, I do know that we've learned a lot of lessons, and we did a lot of reflecting, and our district even had a summer program where they even honed in on some of that. So one thing in particular is that we have broken down whole classes into groups of 6. So I am essentially, they're having, and attention span of little ones isn't as long. So even an hour and a half, 45 minutes reading, 45 minutes of math is going to be a substantial amount of time. But I'm essentially doing that 3 times, and I'm doing it with each block of 6 kids. So they're getting that core instruction in a small virtual group. Also, we've made a point, we're kind of thinking about it in 3-week increments. And so we're putting together materials for parents, for families to come and pick up or to be delivered as part of the lunch combination. So we're looking at what sorts of math manipulatives they're going to need and creating those and having them in a bag, writing notebooks that they're going to need, having those in a bag, having colored folders so they have all of these organizational tools at home. Because, I mean, keeping in mind, especially at our age, everything can't be virtual. I mean, this is when they learn how to write. So to miss that is going to be tough. I think also partnering with the parents is going to be critical. And so having some of those learning sessions with parents and supporting one another in this, I think is going to be really important. So those are some things, some lessons learned and some things that we're looking at. The latest craze for delivery, K2 is going through Class Dojo. And so the parents will have access, and then the kids all have iPads, K1. And so they have a class link that they'll scan, and then they'll go to Class Dojo, and then that's where their links, their information will be. So that's kind of what we're trying. The latest craze is the Bitmoji classroom, but that being a space, I'm amazed, but being a space where you can even have cubbies for every one of your kids, and they click on it and they get their individual schedule and their differentiated work. And so So many lessons learned.
Have you made your Bitmoji classroom yet?
I have one, but then I keep seeing, and my new colleague who's at a different school who I don't know has shared, and I don't know if mine's up to par. So I have some work cut out for me, but I'm working on it. The links, it's wrapping your brain around shifting curriculum, shifting grade level, shifting to all. Yeah, it's just lots to process. I'm working on it.
Awesome. And there were some questions coming in the chat just about like, are there any suggestions for engineering activities, or maybe some like art activities or things that incorporate some art, where kids are kind of interacting with things offline, and they may be doing some stuff online too, but do you have any suggestions?
So, yeah, that's a great question. One thing that I was thinking about, and I meant to mention it, but thinking about labs at a first grade and science and labs at a first grade level, they are sometimes more cookbook, not that they can't, but, you know, kind of getting into some of those things. So thinking about those very simplistic things that you could put in a bag, like, you know, the dancing raisins, or some just things that go along with, you could add some of those fun little things that every 3 weeks you have one experiment that the kids hold on to these until you do them with the teacher live, that kind of thing. In terms of art, and we actually, so last year, our district collaborated, the special area teachers collaborated, and they kind of had move at your own pace, but some ideas of things people could do. So like, I have a son who was in first grade last year, and we did like a scavenger hunt and created a collage taking pictures of letters in his name that we found in nature. So that was one activity that we did. They also had some different movement games. So with a pair of socks, we did crab hockey at home. But the PE teacher, the art teacher, the music teacher all had these activities. This year, they've created a schedule, and they're going to have live classes that they can log into with some of those people. Now, I would love to also incorporate it into the synchronous and asynchronous learning, but teaching kids to read in that 40-minute block, it's being like, you know, for reading, I mean, we're looking at an interactive read aloud, we're looking at sight words for 5 minutes, we're looking at phonics, we're looking at kind of a decodable reading, and then you're done and you're moving on to 5 minutes of math movement. And so lots.
That is a lot. And Jill, I don't know if you shared this earlier, but I saw your like Lego examples of just how you incorporated Legos, and just thought those were really cool. So if you have a minute to kind of share some of those ideas.
Sure. I have a 8th grader, a 6th grader, and a 2nd grader now at home. And so that idea of how do you engage them, and being a teacher, you know, they're blessed and cursed with that, but that, you know, it's kind of setting SMART goals, like what do we want to accomplish, but also in the summer based on interest or what people have. And 2 out of the 3 in particular love Legos. So just seeing a post somewhere, but there are lots of Lego challenges. Again, the turns off every so often my new trailer that I kind of teach in. I'm sorry, I'm moving. This is horrible. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's totally understandable.
I don't know how to avoid. I can't avoid it. But just using the Padlet like we talked about before, but then specific ideas of things that they could build with their families, and that kind of engineering component of building and using their Legos to try and create different things, maybe that align with lessons, maybe just kind of freeform.
Yeah, like I love you said, your parents want to build a new car or want to buy a new car and they want you to build it. You enter a contest to build the tallest tower. Like just thinking about those things and using Legos is really cool. Lindsay, I know that you are full of ideas, and that was one of my favorite things with working with you, is that I always just felt so inspired and energized after talking with you and just like ready to kind of take things on. What are some ideas that you have for, like, you mentioned it before, like thinking about using limited materials, but what are some like specific ideas that you can give our audience for the fall?
So yeah, there's a lot of digital things that can make a science teacher's life easier. One of the ones that I really like is Google Science Journal. So basically you can turn any device, whether it's their cell phone, an iPad, some even run off the computer, into a way to collect data for science. And so there's a whole bunch of awesome little things that you can do with that. So your kids can be collecting information of, I mean, there's physics, there's biology, there's earth science related ones. I think there's over 75 different things that they can collect data on. So it's really cool. So things that are getting them active, but don't require them to have anything. Also just using household items and things that you know they're going to have around the house, maybe just simple Legos. Even high schoolers love a good Lego. I've found that my kids like to build things. Even out of paper, I found some cool things, and we talked about like making a putt-putt course out of just paper. Or there's like a little computer that you make out of paper. So just cool things that you're utilizing what you have. And so that you know all those kids are going to have access to it. One of the things that we're lucky to have this year that we didn't have in the spring is that we are allowed to create like supplies that kids can pick up from the high school. So I find that that's going to be awesome for some of my kids that maybe they don't have those things even at home that I do as a teacher. And so we can make little supply bags that we can make optional that they pick up. So I think that's going to really be awesome this fall.
Another thing that I just wanted to touch on really quickly was how much I used Flipgrid. I haven't said much about it, but in terms of collaboration between kids, it was a way, I think a lot of our younger teachers, K1, did their morning meeting that way, and then the kids could respond to a question, and then they could watch all of their classmates. And even if you wanted to make comments on that, and that was a neat way for social emotional and collaboration. And I thought about, as you start to teach story elements, or you start to teach like building a story, you could have a collaboration of where one kid starts a story and then they listen to it on Flipgrid, and then the next kid kind of adds the next portion to that story, and then a next person. So I thought that could be a really fun way to incorporate kind of that collaboration piece and that creativity, under the literacy umbrella. And the other thing that I hadn't really gotten to talk about, but in terms of, we use Flipgrid also to record like kids created motions for vocabulary, almost like a charade, but they recorded themselves doing it, and they did it kind of regularly over the course of a week. So that kinesthetic connecting to what the word or what the root or what the prefix or suffix meant, they enjoyed it, and I think it stuck a little better.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. And as we're wrapping up, our time together is almost over. But I just wanted to talk about, you guys shared with me these Win Wednesdays that you have at Mooresville this year, and I just think it's a really great idea. Do you mind talking a little bit about what that means?
So at the elementary level, that the morning block is really an opportunity. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, the synchronous learning is where the kids are getting core instruction. And core instruction everybody gets, and granted with that group of 6, it will be tailored a little bit based on who I know is in that group eventually, but it is core instruction versus Win Wednesdays. The kids will be grouped or called based on specific need. And in first grade, I envision that to be more of my guided reading groups. There's also an opportunity for clubs at my school. Now, I don't know how that's going to work with our online academy, but there's talk of clubs, there's talk of enrichment groups. So really, and then in the afternoons are when PLCs are going to meet. So I think it's an opportunity to differentiate and get kids excited about what's going on.
Great. Lindsay, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so at the high school, it's going to be really similar. So it's called What I Need Wednesday. So it's giving the kids what they need. So it's kind of a break from instruction, more of a focus on social emotional learning, a lot of small group instruction so kids can come in for office hours, or I might pull specific small groups to work on certain topics. My kids, when I was talking to them this week, they're like, are we going to have clubs? I want to make new friends. I mean, that's what high schoolers want. And so we're really pushing to have, like, our club meetings are going to be on that day. And a lot of those clubs, like with the environmental club, I still want to get my kids outside and doing things. I was able to, in the spring, pull off some service learning projects, even with COVID. So I'm hoping to get my kids out in the community and helping the community. And so I think that is really core, is that I realize that our core instruction is really important, but they're still kids, and they need all the other stuff too. And so that's going to be what Wednesdays are all about, giving kids what they need.
Yes, and social emotional learning is going to be even more important than it was in years past. So as we're wrapping up, is there a top takeaway that you want to leave our audience today? Jill, do you have a couple takeaways from today's conversation?
I think the flexibility is key, and I think if anything, what I've learned and what I'm learning is the growth mindset has been so real, and the making mistakes or not knowing something yet and moving forward and learning and doing it again and coming up with new ways. And as new problems or new challenges or new needs of some of our students come up, you know, it's not, I can't, it's how am I going to solve this? And I think that, you know, maybe in some ways being in a smaller district, it's a little bit easier, but really, I think it's amazing what we can accomplish when we kind of have that mindset. But yeah, I think that's the biggest: flexibility and growth and learning opportunities for all.
Definitely. Lindsay, what's your takeaway?
I mean, this is personal to me, is get your kids outside, like get them away from their screens, give them things to do outside, get them back in touch with nature, get them doing science or whatever subject you teach, get them doing that outside. Somebody asked earlier about art. You can do art outside. There's so many things that you can do. Nature journaling. That's one of the things that I want my kids to do this year, so that they're writing and they're drawing about the things they see in nature. So that's really big for me, is getting my kids outside, but also want to engage my students. One of the things with high school kids, if they're not engaged, they're not coming. And it's going to be really hard to chase them down to get them to come to class if we're virtual. So making your class hands-on, making it interactive, changing up we have to submit lesson plans this year, which is going to be a little different for me, is that they want you to switch what you're doing every 10 minutes. And so just making it fun and engaging for your kids.
I think I froze. Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. I'm so sorry.
I wasn't sure if it was you or if it was me.
Yes, I think I froze. So I missed that end part, but I'm sure it was really good.
That's right.
I think you said it best earlier when you said that science is a verb, right? And school is a verb, learning is a verb, right? And just really kind of thinking it in that frame is where to go from there. And I'm going to see if we can maybe answer one question before we sign off. Let's see. Does anyone have any good ideas for virtual icebreakers that maybe get them, you know, interacting with things hands-on?
And so I can tell you some of the ones that I did this week with my freshman orientation. So we did that sharing objects. So we started really easy, like it's more like a scavenger hunt. Find something to write with. Now find something to write on, and they all show it in their video so that I know that they have something to write with and write on. Then we got a little bit more serious with, like, find your pet, tell us, and then everyone shared their pet, and if they didn't have one, they drew a little picture of their pet or showed a picture. But as we went through it, the questions got a little bit more personal, which that was cool. we did an activity where we found 10 things that we all had in common, and it was a small group so that they felt like they were connected to other kids. But really, I think any way that they're telling you a little bit about themselves and that you're telling them about you. One of the things that I stress when I'm training upperclassmen is that you always share first, so you kind of set the precedence for what you expect out of like a response, and especially with younger kids and freshmen, that's very helpful. But just get them talking about themselves and letting them know that you care about them. It can be so many simple things that you can do.
That is great advice. Jill, anything?
So she took lots of mine. I think it's interesting how elementary and high school students, that love, that nurturing, that class community is so universal. Two things one thing, as I was pulling out resources, because I had taught first grade before, and so there are all those favorite books that are meant to teach things or meant to talk about class community. And I'm going to just put it out there to people to consider, because something I've been thinking a lot about is how a lot of those books are set in school and are set talking about, again, the lights. I guess it's every 15 minutes. I didn't know. But how we have to be considerate of like that response. And so thinking about reading the same First Day Jitters or Lily's Purple Plastic Purse, or that setting of those taking place in schools, like how are kids going to respond to that? Is there a rubbing salt in the wounds of that this stable place isn't a place, and just grappling with that and the responses and noticing that with your kids? I was just in a first grade planning meeting, and one of the teachers suggested, and would be a whole new learning even for me to figure out, but reading something like First Day Jitters, but having then the teacher reading it with a QR code so they could scan it the night before the first day and hear their teacher reading this book to them before they logged in for the first time. Now the logistics and figuring that out, but that was one idea that somebody had, that, we're all in this together and figuring it out.
It's a really good idea. And I'm so sorry. I know we could probably talk for the rest of the evening, but we are actually over time. So I want to thank you both so much for coming on today when you're in your first day of, back to school. We really appreciate it. And you've shared so many incredible ideas to start the school year. Just a reminder, this conversation will be posted so you can rewatch it if you'd like. And then also all of the links will be included in that post on our YouTube channel. So thank you everyone for participating, and see you next time.